this week, and one of the biggest stories of the week is that there is no more encore for Anthem. Anthem Next, as it was known internally, developed by 30 to 40 folk, has been canned after 1.5 years of redevelopment by BioWare and EA. I think a big component of this decision as well is definitely driven by COVID-19. As we've seen, games that are in the final phase of execution, it's probably something that you can work from home effectively. I think trying to overhaul a game as it was, with so many moving parts and so many creative decisions to make, it just, to me, seemed near impossible. And also the context that BioWare is coming off 2 flops, critical flops at least. Anthem sold very well. And they have a new Mass Effect in pipe, and then also Dragon Age. So having a third game is quite challenging. And then just the final thing there was around Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, who probably populates 90% of our stories. Yeah. Just had some insider reports around EA and their thinking around games in general. And I guess their surprise at Jedi Fallen Order, which is a single player only game, selling so well that they've actually gone and changed the direction of Dragon Age, which I must admit, Sweeney, that I didn't even know that it was going to be a live service game. So this actually shocked me when I read through the report. Maybe it's just something I wasn't really paying attention to.
My impression or my assumption is it would have had significant live service features, but would have still been a single player game in general. That's the take that I would have had on the way they would have approached it. Obviously, it could have been basically like Destiny or Anthem. Who knows? Well, but I think it would have, because they already started to feed some of that stuff in, and we talk about the last me making that horrible prediction about they're going to announce Dragon Age has multiplayer, and then realizing that Inquisition had multiplayer anyway. It made sense that they would have stepped further into some live service stuff.
And at the time he said it, and probably more like a year before, based on Jason Schreier's reporting. I mean, like, you're kind of right though, because they were going really hard at multiplayer. You know what I think it would have been like? I think the way that at least my take from reading the article and just thinking about the business side of it, I think, are you familiar with Marvel's Avengers, the game that Square Enix made?
Yeah. I haven't played it, but
even I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, because like it does actually have what most people say is a pretty decent single player campaign, but it's so dragged down by pushing you into this live service element, which doesn't really have enough going for it for most people.
Right.
I haven't played it, so I can't really comment on it, but I mean, there's not a lot of love for that game, I would say.
I think you can find the right balance. So I think looking back at Destiny, I think that had the right balance where you could play the single player campaign, and the single player campaign was pretty good, especially nowadays with all the added content and the fact that it's a free game effectively. You get quite a lot out of the single player campaign, and then of course you get hooked. A lot of people I think do, and you jump onto the multiplayer stuff. But that's a good balance between offering a really concrete, good, solid single player experience, but then having the added multiplayer stuff, which is where they get most of their money from.
Look, I mean, there's games that have done it well, and I've played none of them. But so I'll just put that out there.
You're not
like
a gamer.
Destiny, Division. There's games that have done it well, but there's only so many live service games that people are willing to spend time to.
Exactly the thing as well, right? I think there's, because those games take potentially tens of hours a week sometimes to complete. Especially you look at a game like Destiny, in order to do some of the raids and stuff. We used to do, almost every evening we'll spend 3-4 hours at least playing that game. And that's the kind of time sink you need on one of those types of games because of the things that it asks of you. So it's overload. There's way too many of those things out there. And
talking about one that people didn't want to put their time into is Anthem.
That's right. Yeah, we should probably go back and talk about
that. But it's all associated about the same thing. And that's kind of like what I'm fascinated about, because, offline we've been chatting a lot about time and commitment and just, how to make the most of your time and things like that. And having experienced this with Rocket League, like there was a period of time that's all I was playing. I was, if I ever had time for gaming, I'd only play Rocket League, and I loved it, and I still love that game. But I'd almost look at it as a commitment. It was like I was committed to playing that game. Like it was a job, but it wasn't a job. But just to be clear, but it felt like I needed to play X amount, and I was like calculating the rocket pass and how many hours I'd need to play and all this stuff. Whereas I don't really have any games like that. I don't play any live service games, but I do really wonder, how many can really exist well in the marketplace, because it feels like all the businesses have pushed into that direction. But I really question, once you've got like big players like Fortnite, like other sort of like games like that, like the Destinies, how many of them can you really have? Like, even if Anthem was really good, I feel like it needs to be exceptional to be
Obviously,
able to
there's a limit because you've got a finite number of people playing games and you've got a finite number of hours in the day. So there's an absolute limit to that. And I think it now has become a case of different game developers and studios and publishers competing against each other for people's time. That's what it's become. And all of these games are literally marketed, and the thinking behind them is, how do we get more people? How do we get their share of the day to play our game instead of playing a competitor's game? And that's what it comes down to. And I think there is still room for those kind of games, and I think there's still room in innovation, because you get people going, okay, I've had enough of Fortnite, let's say. I'm happy to go try something else and get into that more. So there's still room for stuff, but it's a case of how much money do you want to invest in the gamble, because it's quite a bit of money you got to invest in setting these games up to draw people into your game, to make them have that decision to go, you know what, I'll give up on Fortnite and the time that's spent, and I'll come to your game. And I just don't know if Dragon Age has that history, and the amount of marketing required to be able to get people onto it from that perspective. It's an uphill battle for EA, I think.
So I just want to talk a bit about Anthem.
Yeah.
Yes.
So first of all, I actually feel really bad for the developers that have spent all their time trying to rework this game, because no one likes having their hard work, even if you're getting paid for it. It's still, you personally invested in the work that you do sometimes, and having it essentially scrapped. I hope that some of the work that they did maybe can be repurposed. I've heard someone say that at some point maybe the next Mass Effect has these suits that you can fly around.
Nice. That'd be awesome, actually.
Because honestly, like, I only played probably about 5 hours of Anthem, and my time with it was actually pretty good. It's a very technically well-made game. The flying mechanics were great. Shooting felt pretty good, and I didn't get anywhere close to that end game to then experience what I think a lot of people were let down by. But the core of the game seemed pretty good, and obviously had a lot of thought put into it. But it just wasn't really, it didn't hook me. And I think that's probably the thing with a lot of people as well, why they may not have, stuck with the game, is it just doesn't feel like there's a hook there. But it is a shame. I honestly think it was probably a bad decision all round to spend that amount of time myself, because this didn't feel like a Destiny situation or a Final Fantasy Realm Reborn, or games that essentially turned it around. Because Destiny, a lot of people forget that Destiny at launch went through a lot of woes, and they turned that around. And obviously Final Fantasy 14 is the huge one.
Well, I've got a counterpoint on that, but I just wanted to see if Mike shared your view about should they have kept on working on this game?
Oh, it's a tough one. So I finished the game on PC, mostly single player. I think I played with the G-Man, as we like to call him, one of our friends, a little bit. But it was mostly single player, and I did finish the entire game, and I actually enjoyed the experience. I thought it got a little repetitive, even in the single player component. But because I only played really the single player stuff, I didn't care at all about the end game stuff that I think a lot of people did. So to me, it was actually a good experience. I felt it could have used a little bit more polish, and there were certain elements that felt like they clearly rushed the game out, and they could have added a bit more to it, specifically around the story, around the way the pacing happened, around the fact that he always went back to this hub. There was a bit of continuity issues in that sense, but the game itself, as Swinny said, was solid. The flying was fantastic, felt really, really good. The weapons felt great. The abilities were awesome. It was a really, really solid game. And it's a shame that, you can't sell a game like that just as a single player experience for, $40-50. You rely on the fact that you need to do that end game content to keep people coming back to it. So yeah, I think I do agree with Swinney on that one. I do feel that they probably could have put more into it and made it a success, but I don't know what's going on at EA. They obviously had priorities. I think working in the conditions that we currently work, on that point, I actually notice even with the team that I'm working with, we're all in the same city, yet we've started to really grow apart, and it's made some conversations more difficult. It's made collaborating on a bunch of things more difficult, and I can see how this would affect something like Anthem as well. So I think it's a shame overall. I really enjoyed Anthem for what it was when it came out, and I thought it had real good potential, and I actually was waiting till they added a whole bunch more stuff and next was going to come out to go back to it and see how much it's changed. But I guess I'll just have to remember the experiences as they were, because it's probably not going to happen anymore.
So I think that's like getting back to my counterpoint to with what Swinney was saying, and putting my business hat on, just like looking at this, like Anthem was the 5th best-selling game in 2019, which is kind of wild when you think about it, and that's not just dollar sales and stuff like that. That's selling volume, and they have a player base of anywhere from like 5 to 10 million, maybe higher, right? I think from a business sense, to be honest, it makes a lot of sense to have a crack at trying to make something of this game. Like, to me, that does actually make perfect sense. Obviously, it hasn't worked out. But I mean, like, for what, $5 million investment for a dev team to try to pull something together versus like a player base, if they can get something working. And to your point, Mike, I think a lot of people, if they did release like an Anthem next, I feel like people would have jumped in and have a crack at it and just, what is this? And it had such a bad reputation that I feel like if it was a 8 out of 10 or, as our friend, I've forgotten his name. What's his name? Cam. 7 out of 10 even. Then people would have said, this is pretty decent. Because I think the bar was set so low that I feel like people would have been receptive for it to be like, okay, it's competent, it's fine.
But it was a decent game to me. To me, it was probably like an 8 out of 10 almost in terms of the single player campaign. I thought it was a really solid game. I just think people had really high expectations for it because it came right off the back of Mass Effect not delivering what it was meant to deliver. It was really highly hyped. There were a lot of stories I remember back then about how the reason Mass Effect didn't do as well as it should have and development wasn't as great as it should have been is because they pivoted a lot of the resources onto Anthem. So there was this huge hype, kind of understandably so, given what they did to the Mass Effect IP.
Also, that first glimpse they gave us,
it looked amazing.
Yeah, that was one of the best first impressions you could ever make with a game.
So people had a lot of hype for it, so I can see why they felt burnt. But just one more thing on that. Yeah. I think the issue is if you start a game with relatively low expectations or you meet the expectations that you set out there, it's a lot easier to sell people stuff. It's a lot easier to get them to purchase things in game. The problem with something like this, and I can kind of see how EA would have made this decision, is they went, we are now on the wrong foot. People don't have a positive experience about us. How do we deliver something where they're willing to pay money for it instead of just looking and going, are you serious? You want me to pay for this now as well? Like, you want me to keep paying you in microtransactions, even though you just deliver this half-assed thing? And I think they probably did that. But again, if they actually delivered a really good quality product, people would have gone, okay, this is actually pretty good. I'm willing to pay for these skins. I'm willing to pay for this stuff. And they would have made it a viable, IP. So, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to throw to final thoughts from Swinney just on sort of, Anthem, but then also, that space around BioWare, like where they're at as a studio.
I think they've done well to make people start to get distracted, as Mike has said before in the past. Oh, look, shiny thing, Mass Effect trilogy. Ooh, So I think that they're doing the right things they need to. This doesn't help, but I think at this point, a lot of people just don't care about Anthem in general. So they're, Anthem's not getting reworked. Oh, whatever. That was old news, For us that are paying a lot more attention to it, but I think the general people have moved on a long time ago. So.
That's exactly what I was going to ask as well. I'm not familiar with who's still left there. I know Casey Hudson left, and then did he come back for a while?
He left, came back, and then left again.
Then he left again now? Okay, great. And I'm sure other people within who were, originally from BioWare / through the original Mass Effect era. I know the writer, the Mass Effect 1 and 2 writer left. There was an article about that recently, wasn't there?
Director of Dragon Age left at the same time as Casey Hudson as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of the people who... So now to me, BioWare it's just a name to some extent. And I apologize to people who are still there, that have been there through the entire journey. Unfortunately, I'm not across that. But I feel like it's not the same BioWare that is the BioWare we remember fondly from our childhoods and the BioWare we remember through the Mass Effect series. It's a different thing now. So I think the expectations are probably going to have to be different as well as to what the studio and what the name BioWare means nowadays.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I do think, having worked at lots of different organizations, there is a bit of an energy that you have at a place that has had a lot of success. And there's almost a mentality, even if it's not where it was before, there's almost a mentality that goes, well, hey, we're BioWare, we can capture that again. And that type of mentality, it's very hard to instill into people that, magic can happen here. It's very hard to do that in new places. So, I mean, that's the one probable benefit, I think, just around the name and everything. But I think you're right, Sweeney. I think, look, clear the decks on Anthem. Mass Effect Trilogy comes out. If that's a big success and everyone's really genuinely happy with it, which I hope that, because I want to get it, I think that would then set them up for Dragon Age, which you think would be the next game up. But, geez, that feels like that's still another year plus away. So we'll, I guess, watch that space. Just heading into a whole series of Sony news. And to start, PSVR 2 has been announced.